Hello there, AP Human Geography students. Let's learn all about urbanization. It's a great topic, and we're finally taking a lot of the focus in the world of human geography down from the country level, and we're going to learn a whole lot about the geography of cities and all about cities around the world. So let's do it. Come on, clicking in. So let's start off by looking at this. This was a map of Manhattan many a year ago before it got built into a city. And then this is Manhattan today. So this is the biggest city in the United States, and you see it's overflown into New Jersey and Long Island and Queens all over here. So, yep. And why is New York such a great place to build America's biggest city? Well, as you can see, it's surrounded by a bunch of islands, so that keeps like big waves and crazy parts of weather mostly at bay. And New York is also surrounded on, well, really on four sides, but especially three sides by major rivers, so ships can dock up and kind of come at New York from all angles. So that's why this is the perfect spot to build the biggest city in the United States. Okay, and then these are the percent of the country that is urbanized. So let's take some general vibes here. Looks like the Western world is pretty heavily urbanized. Germany and Italy surprisingly aren't as much. But Latin America is very urbanized. There's a whole lot of people that live in cities in Latin America. Far East is pretty urbanized, South Korea, Japan. But then developing Asia, maybe they've got some work to do. The Arab world, they're kind of a mixed bag. The Soviet Union, they've got some work to do. But the most not urban, the most not city part of the world is kind of like Central and especially Eastern Africa, with a couple of the other developing Asian countries thrown in there. All right, moving on. Okay, this is a cool little map. It just shows that cities are connecting around the whole world. And yeah, the cities are kind of taking over the world, and it's going to cover up all of nature too. And I think this is so cool. This is a city in Argentina. Look at how perfectly symmetrical the city was designed. We're going to talk a lot about these concepts in this unit, about kind of city design and urbanscapes. And yeah, looking at this aerial view of this city, I am so impressed. High five to whoever planned this out. Because I guarantee you, probably almost every one of these city blocks is like exactly 1 square kilometer. So, oh gosh, geometry, it's important. All right. So why would you build a city in certain locations? Okay, so all of the first cities on planet Earth were chosen for a couple reasons. And those reasons always tended to be about, is it a defensible location or is it an effective location for trade? And by trade, it largely means, do you have access to river or the ocean? Because for almost all of human history, the fastest way to get around was by boat. So gotta have access to the ocean or access to a river. And defensibility, that largely has to do with like, are there a bunch of like mountains near your city? Could you like put some forts on top of those mountains and kind of control all of the ways to get into the city? So let's look at some examples here. All right, so this is Miami, and it's kind of a good trade-based city because it's right along the coast of South Beach, so ships can sail up there and trade with people. But defensively, not a very good city. Okay, there's no mountains, no choke points. You can't defend it if it's under attack. This city, on the other hand, really great for defensibility. I think this is some city in Italy. I don't remember the name, but alternatively, though, this city would be terrible for trade because it would be really hard for people to like access this city. I mean, they've got to go down this one crazy path to get up there, and it's otherwise totally stuck alone on top of this mountain. But good luck trying to attack that city, though. Okay, and then this is this isn't Buenos Aires. This is a city similar to Buenos Aires, but this now has kind of the best of both worlds. Okay, it's got all these great mountain ridges up here, so you could very easily kind of defend these kind of choke points into the city. You could have military bases on top of there, and they're largely defensible. And then you also have the ocean connectivity and these big waterways going through the city, so you can connect people all over the place. So this is an excellent place to build a city, but there's maybe too many mountains to the point where it's going to get in the way of you building infrastructure and having kind of a perfect symmetry to the city. All right, and then here's where almost all of the early cities were in one of the first cultures on planet Earth of ancient Egypt. And you can see here that just about every city right next to the Nile River. Why would that make sense that one of our first cultures on planet Earth was in Egypt? Well, the Nile River is the longest river in the world, and it's a pretty awesome river if you ask me about it too, because the river flows north. It's one of the few rivers that does that on planet Earth. And the wind currents usually blow south. So the Nile River has kind of this natural highway vibe to it, where if you want to go north, you just kind of chill in your boat and the stream takes you north. If you want to go south, you post up some sails and you blow, the wind blows in your sail and you go south. So it's super cool. All right, and then here's something that you'll see really commonly today, and this applies to Las Vegas. Many cities today are built in valleys. And most major cities in the world, I would argue even including Las Vegas, are located near major rivers. Today, we largely don't use rivers for trade, but we still need a lot of water for human activity. Las Vegas is pretty darn close to the Colorado River, and Las Vegas is in this big, deep valley. And the advantage for being in a valley is you do have mountains all around you that could be kind of seen as protection from enemies, but it's also protection from the environment, because valleys tend to have a more consistent and lower temperature than if you were up in a mountain. So that's why people like living in valleys. And let's check this out. So this is a city that was built on top of an old fortress, and it's kind of cool. You can see the leftovers of this World War I era fortress that was still kind of. People just said, oh, hey, let's tear down the fortress, build buildings in the middle of it. But they kind of kept the general earthworks going because it was too much work to remove them, I guess. So you see these hard borders that they dug into the ground there. So this would be a city with kind of a defensive alteration. Okay, and then, yeah, let's also talk about the Spratly Islands. We're going to bring these up again in the political unit. But the Spratly Islands, it's kind of uncovered by this little marker here. But there are a bunch of these little islands that are mostly between the countries of Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia. And for almost all of human history, nobody cared about the Spratly Islands. Like, they existed, but they were really, really tiny. People couldn't really live on them. But nowadays, they're a big, big important thing. And China is doing this. China is actually harvesting out mountains in southern China, loading all of the dirt onto water barges, and then shipping those barges to the Spratly Islands, dumping dirt in the ocean, and expanding the size and scope of the Spratly Islands. So this is one of these Chinese constructions here. You see they've built an entire airport on one of these islands, as well as some buildings for a military base. And why would China do this? Well, China wants to have kind of an island ring controlling the entire South China Sea, so they can kind of have a better expansion of a naval protection zone for China itself. So that's it's definitely not something that Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines are happy about, but it's what's currently happening in our world. Building islands for strategic defensive purposes. Okay, so yeah, let's look at some urban growth patterns. So if you asked me what are the biggest changes on planet Earth in the last 200 years, almost all of those changes I would have to reference cities in some way. Virtually all secondary and tertiary work on planet Earth, well, and all quaternary work as well, is done in cities, and people want to get those jobs. They generally always pay more than primary work, and cities have been growing. Let's check out some of these pictures here. So where are cities growing the most? Surprisingly enough, they're mostly growing in sub-Saharan Africa. And I mean, my sister's been in Uganda for years now, building up the water infrastructure in Uganda so Uganda can have bigger cities that can accommodate more people. Also, a lot of urbanization happening in developing Asia as well. But it looks like the Western world, the former Soviet Union, we're doing a little bit of growth maybe, but we're kind of at peak urbanization. Like we got people living in cities like no one's business. But the rest of the world is now catching up with us. Okay, so yeah, in 1900, 2 out of every 10 people lived in a city. But as we go through history and as we predicted into the future, eventually 7 out of 10 people will live in a city by 2050. So cities are going to continue to grow, and villages and farming communities are continue to kind of go out of style. And I hope you kids recognize why farming communities and villages are going out of style. It's largely because of the Green Revolution. It's because those people, their jobs are being replaced by new advances in agriculture, and people got to make a living. So where are you going to find opportunities? Where are you going to make money? You're going to move into a city. All right, and the percent urban. So it looks like the most urban part of the world is actually South America. That's just surprising to me. You would have expected it would be the West. I mean, the West is pretty well urbanized, but South America actually has us beat. And yeah, developing Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, they are catching up, but they are building new cities all the time. They're expanding their cities all the time, and it's a huge part of what's happening in our world today. Okay, and then the global infrastructure rankings. Okay, so if you want to have effective cities that can accommodate people and accommodate energy and water and traffic and highways, you got to have great infrastructure. And where's the best infrastructure in the world? You guessed it, the West and the Far East. Also, surprisingly, a couple countries in the Middle East have really awesome infrastructure. And then also French Suriname, like, get it, like, good job. Singapore and Malaysia, also really good infrastructure. That was a little unexpected. But you probably did expect that some of the worst infrastructure in the world is in sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, you got to build more roads, more plumbing, more electrical wires, more internet cables. That's how you can have better cities to connect people around your country. Yeah, no doubt. And it looks like the country of Yemen is just kind of left behind in the Middle East. I mean, they're having this civil war right now, so maybe that would be a reason why. But yeah, China's catching up, and the Soviet Union's not too bad. So it's cool to just know all these global infrastructure ratings. And even though South America has all these people living in cities, looks like their cities really aren't that great. So gotta get better infrastructure there. Okay. Yeah, let's check out the why of some of these buildings and cities. Okay, so first of all, this is a city in Germany. I remember when I saw this picture, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to put this somewhere in my Prezi, so I'm putting it right here. And this is one of these old German towns, and you can see it's a pretty well-populated town, pretty beautiful town, honestly, the way they organized it. But why does it make sense that they built this whole city around this kind of horseshoe section of a river? Well, when a river horseshoes around like this, it tends to slow down a little bit. So I'm sure that this was always a popular trading place when people are kind of sailing their ships down the river to trade. And yeah, I don't know. This city just looks so cool. Like, good job, Germany. Good job with your structural design. And then I think this is in Phoenix, Arizona, when they had a dust storm. We can actually have these sometimes in Las Vegas. Thankfully, we haven't had one in a couple years. But dust storms are pretty scary. And I would hope that you would have to adapt your city to best fit the environment you're in. So in Arizona, they've got to put all these special filters on their houses and all these special, things to deal with a dust storm. Other cities don't really have to worry about that. This is an apartment complex in Tokyo, and just look at how thick, how compact and how dense the people are living there together. And that's something that this isn't Tokyo, this is South Korea, never mind. And I remember when I was living in South Korea, I was just shocked at how people lived in these tiny, tiny apartments. I mean, I lived in a tiny, tiny apartment. You can see some of my old YouTube videos when I toured my apartment and such. But people get by, and people adapt to different cityscapes around the world. This is kind of a cool one, too. This kid just took a picture going up to see how the apartments are kind of built on top of each other like that. And then this is a really cool building. I'm pretty confident this is in Dubai. But they designed the whole building based on the Islamic religion. This is the symbol of Islam. So they wanted to include that in their architecture, in their cityscape. Pretty cool. All right. So these slides feature some stats about urbanization. I think these stats are pretty cool, so I'll just comment on what you should write in your notebook. But this is the big theme here, kids. Villages around the world are dying. All these tiny villages that used to be all about farming or mining in very remote parts of the world, they're going down less and less, and cities are growing more and more. Let's look at the city of Dubai. This is probably one of the most famous cities in the world today. It basically didn't exist in the year 1990. 2003, it was building up pretty well. And then in 2012, they built the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. So Dubai is an excellent example of a city that has just sprouted up out of nothing. And it's now the major financial center in the Arab world. Okay, so here's some statistics. Let's see. What should you write down? In 1800, only 2% of the world's population was urbanized. I think that's a great statistic. 98% of people did not live in cities 220 years ago. Now, the majority of people do live in cities. So, and then it just kind of this, I don't know if you need to write all these down, but it just over time, the urban population continues to grow. And in 1950, only 30% lived in cities. So there obviously was a lot of progress made between 1800 and 1950, but the more serious progress has occurred in the last 70 years. In 2008, half the world's population is in cities, and we're well past 2008. By 2030, 60%, and almost 200,000 people join an urban population each day. So, city life, that's where it's at. Everyone's going to live in a city. Okay. The population in urban areas in less developed countries will grow from 1.9 billion to 3.9 billion. Wow, so their urban populations will double in the next 30 years. Or, well, hold on, we're already well through that. In the next 10 years, they'll have doubled since the year 2000. Developed countries, they'll only add maybe another 100 million people to cities. So when we look at global challenges, we really have to consider that the developing world, or the less developed world, same meaning, these countries, their cities are growing at these huge, unbelievable rates. So they need to have the infrastructure, they need to have the capacity to accommodate all these people moving into cities. The overall growth rate for the world population is 1%. The overall growth rate for urban areas is 2%. At that rate, the world's urban population will double every 38 years. Oh my goodness. Cities are growing. All right, so urban explosion. Yep, that's what it is. The urban population growth is the most important change in population geography. 50% of the global population lives in cities. I think you can still use that statistic even today. Almost all population growth will occur in cities, so villages are just not growing. We're not founding new villages anywhere. We're founding bigger cities. So many people are moving into cities. I don't know if you need to get all these down. Okay, developed countries are already urbanized. Yep, that's something I definitely want you to know. In the United States, Europe, Japan, South Korea, cities aren't changing that much. It's Asia and Africa. That's where there's huge changes happening. A lot of those people were born in rural areas and are now moving into cities. What else do you really need to write down based off this slide? Latin America, East Asia are the farthest along. Wow, yeah, maybe even farther along than the West. Africa is urbanizing more slowly than the rest of world regions, but people are still moving into cities all the time. Like, I can show you kids lots of pictures of slums outside of major African cities, and these people would love to live in proper homes and proper apartments. They're just not built yet, and they're not building them fast enough. So those are some more problems in our world today. Okay, so the stages of urbanization. So it's also one of these models that you guys have learned from me already, that over time, certain things are just sort of predicted to happen in any given society. And every society starts rural and moves into a more and more urban stage. It's impossible for your country to be considered developed and not have major cities. You gotta have major cities. In fact, there's a couple countries in the world, like Singapore and Hong Kong, that just sort of are major cities, and they have no rural aspects to them. So, that's kind of where the future is leading us. It's definitely conceivable for me that 99% of a country's population could eventually live in a city, and hardly anybody will live in any outskirts rural areas. All right, moving on. So, percent of percent of urban population 1950 to 2030. So, yeah, this just shows different parts of the world how many people are living in cities. Latin America, North America, Europe, 80% are all going to live in cities by the year 2030. Wow. And over time, every part of the world is growing massively in city population. But the growth is happening way, way faster in Africa and Asia. And hopefully you already got that statistic down in your notes. Okay, so yeah, more maps just showing you the percent of urban. In 1990, the most urban countries were Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Sweden, UK, Germany, Iceland, Venezuela, Argentina, and Chile. And then by the year 2025, there's way more countries that are going to be considered super urban, but especially the Latin American world, the Western world, parts of the Middle East, and the Far East. So that's all super cool. But the whole world is improving. Everybody's moving into cities. Every country. There's no exception. And then urban population in millions. So where will you find most people that live in cities? In Asia, of course, because most of the people are in Asia. But yeah, just so many millions of people are moving into cities all the time. And I think actually if you looked at the largest cities in the world today, something like the vast majority of them are all in China. It's wild. Okay, and then yeah, the average rate of urban growth. The most urban growth is occurring in Afghanistan, Yemen, Uganda, hey, what up? Kenya, Tanzania, and is that Nambia? I think that's Nambia. So, the more you know. All right, why do you move to urban areas? Well, because there's jobs there. That's what it is. There's both push and pull factors. The pull factors that's pulling people in are the fact that cities have opportunities, cities have higher incomes, and that's really the bigger deal. But the push factors are that there could be no job in your old rural city. They could be adapting to new Monsanto-style farming seeds, and those seeds don't need people to work on them as much. Or they could finally bring in combines and fancy agriculture equipment. Or they could be like, hey, we're not going to mine coal here anymore. We're going to use alternate energy resources, so we don't need you coal miners anymore. What are those guys supposed to do? Go to the city to find work. Also, cities tend to be safer. If some parts of the world have a lot of war and famine and drug cartels, if you go to a city, you can largely escape some of those things. I love how it also says boredom on this slide. I think that's funny. But yeah, cities, there's more exciting things to do, especially in Las Vegas. What's up? All right, so yeah, here's just some more things. Why do people move? It's what's pushing them into the city, or what's pushing them out of the rural area into the city, or what is pulling them into the city, what attracts them to the city. But it's everything you can imagine, okay? There's better transportation in cities. Oh, look, they're talking about intervening opportunities. We talked about this in the last unit. Demographic growth, higher wages, better opportunities, better schools, better health services, better access to water and electricity. That's also true. So, a lot to do in a city. I never want to live in a very, very remote place. Some people like the isolation. Some people like the quiet. Not me. I like people. All right, moving on. So, a metropolitan statistical area. Why did I write statistic area? Whatever. Statistical area. An MSA. This is an agglomeration of cities in a region. It's sort of like many cities that are combined together to form what's more commonly known as a city. And then there's MSAs, which... Well, and here's a good example of it. So if we were in class right now, I'd be like, hey, kids, where is Disneyland? And some students would say Disneyland is in Los Angeles. But then other students would correctly say Disneyland is in Anaheim, California. But nobody really cares if you say Los Angeles or Anaheim, California. Los Angeles is the bigger city. Los Angeles is the MSA. But Anaheim is kind of consumed inside of the greater entity that is Los Angeles. And it's sort of like the same thing here in Las Vegas. Like, if you're traveling around the country and somebody asks you, hey, where are you from? Are you going to say, I'm from Southern Highlands, Nevada? Or I'm from Mountain's Edge, Nevada. I'm from, Summerlin, Nevada. Like, people aren't going to know where that is. So it's much more comfortable for you to just simply say, I'm from Las Vegas. Because Las Vegas is our metropolitan statistical area. It is our greater entity. And I've done the same thing my whole life. Like, I was born in La Mesa, California. But La Mesa, California is right next to San Diego. So I just tell everybody I was born and raised in San Diego, and no one will hold it against me. Okay? So let's check out the MSAs of the United States. So here's all the MSAs, and I don't think I could name all of these, but this MSA right here is, of course, Denver. This MSA right here is, of course, Phoenix. And then all the MSAs in California kind of merge together, huh? But of course, the big ones are Los Angeles and San Francisco. This has got to be Portland, Oregon. This has got to be Seattle. So these are all the MSAs and how they kind of combine together to create bigger city entities. And then here are what we call mega regions. So these are not only MSAs, but they're MSAs that sort of connect to other MSAs. Like, the Southern California MSA not only is LA the biggest part of it, but they've said it's also even consumed Las Vegas. Like, oh, come on, I don't think we're California, but we definitely do have most of the tourists, most people that gamble in Las Vegas casinos are from Southern California. So it kind of makes sense that we're kind of associated the most with Southern California. San Francisco's reach is so big, they've consumed San Jose and Sacramento and Oakland. So they're kind of this mega region here. This is interesting. Cascadia is this mega region of Seattle and Portland. The Front Range is Albuquerque to Denver. I don't even think those are usually connected. The Texas Triangle. What are the three parts of this? It's got to be Austin, Houston, and maybe Dallas, and that's San Antonio. That might make sense. The Great Lakes, this is just a mega region. The Northeast, this is where I think half of all the economic output in America comes from, but this has got all of our really major cities here. It's Boston, New York, DC, Baltimore, Pennsylvania, the Piedmont Atlantic. This is basically just Atlanta. And then, well, Florida, congratulations, you're one big MSA. You never end. All right, cool. And yeah, metropolitan statistical areas. So New York is this huge entity that even takes over parts of New Jersey and Connecticut, which I think is pretty insane. And then what else we got here? So these are just the bigger, the more comfortable MSAs that you would say in all over the United States. So, oh wow, I was right. Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. So, yep, all the MSAs in America. You see how connected they all are. So, pretty cool stuff. All right. So, these pictures do a good job at showing the concept of market area and threshold. These are concepts you'll read about in the key issue homework. So, I just want to emphasize that market area is usually based on an MSA. It's usually based on a bigger metropolitan area. And, like, for the longest time, well, actually, here, I'll just zoom in on these. I'll just explain this. So these are the MSAs for basketball teams. And, they've got like the Utah Jazz, and they're like, okay, where are fans of the Utah Jazz largely located? And they're just kind of all over the state of Utah. The Arizona Suns, all over Arizona, but not all of Arizona, because there's plenty of people in Arizona who still root for the Lakers. So I just think that's pretty interesting. And it's just cool to see this map of where people root for certain sports teams. And it looks like almost all of New England are Celtic fans. So that's all kind of cool there. But it's not based on a specific city. It's based on kind of the spread that the city has. And then what's this? This has got to be baseball teams. So the Los Angeles Angels, they have just such a small spread. The Texas Rangers are really big. The Astros, not so much. The Atlanta Braves, just about everybody likes the Braves. New York Yankees, ugh, I hate the Yankees. Oh, and what's the other New York team? It looks like nobody cares about them. That is so sad. But if you looked at a map like this and you ask yourself, like, I want to make a new baseball team. Where should I make it? And if you said, okay, why don't we put a fourth baseball team in Southern California, you'd be an idiot because you're already competing against all these other teams. It would make a whole lot of sense for you to make a baseball team maybe in Utah, so you could kind of spread the fan base around this part of the United States. But then again, you also have to consider population statistics. So it maybe would make a lot of sense to make a North Carolina baseball team to try to get a lot of people in this part of the country to kind of associate and root for them. But yeah, so you should consider the spread and the population of where all the other baseball teams are. Okay, and this has got to be the football team spread. So looks like here that, well, this is before the Raiders moved to Vegas, but now we can sort of see why the Raiders moved to Vegas. Because the Los Angeles Chargers and now the LA Rams as well have kind of moved into LA. The San Francisco Giants were kind of dominating Northern California, so it makes sense for the Raiders trying to move over here, maybe take away some of this spread from the Denver Broncos and from the Arizona Cardinals. So moving to Las Vegas, great idea. Switch up the map. All right, and then what is this? This is hockey teams, and this is also before the Golden Knights were made, and it's kind of the same argument. It's like there's literally no hockey fans in Southern Nevada or Utah. The way you can excite them is by bringing a team in there. So go Knights, go. And then if I know we've got another team now in I think Seattle, right? The Seattle Kraken. So they're now taking over this part. So that makes a whole lot of sense too. I think it might make sense to make a hockey team in like Alabama. Try to get some fans there. Maybe in Nebraska. Actually, Nebraska would be an interesting spot to build a hockey team. So just spreading it out on the map there. All right, I'll save this part for the next video. Peace out.